designer of Pop-It-Ups dies for Elizabeth Craft Designs, and today I'll be teaching a tutorial on this. A stacked Star Accordion album. So the technique here is how you can make a double high version of the Star Accordion album so that you have these stacked stars on top of each other. When you purchase the Star Accordion, you'll first need to use the Elizabeth Craft Designs die snips to just go in and snip all the tiny little connection threads to separate the dies into their individual pieces. And if you want to, you can use the die file set to file down any nubs. The card I'm making today is going to be all white and black, so I'm starting with a nice thick cardstock, 100-pound card shop cardstock. It's called Marshmallow, and I'm going to cut 4 strips that are 5.5 inch wide by 12 inches long. So I separated out all the decorator dies, and now I'm left with just my accordion die. And then what I want to do is I want to line that up on the strip in the upper left corner of the strip. And I'd like that die to go right along that left-hand edge and right along the top. You always have choices of which die cutting machine you use. The dies will work in many different machines. I'm going to use a Sizzix Big Shot, and the trick here is to stop the cutting pad short of the bottom edge. So you can see my top cutting pad just comes about halfway through those little star holes. I'm going to kind of hold that in place to get it started, and then when it rolls through, there will be no pressure against that bottom edge. So every bit of that Star Accordion is going to cut nicely through the cardstock, except the bottom edge where there was no pressure. And that way, that will allow me to extend the height of that and not have to, glue them together. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the die right back on the strip again, and I'm going to slide it down. And again, I'm going to line it up with the left-hand edge. That's what's going to make sure that they're exactly aligned on top of each other. I'm also going to use the top cutting edge right there, the top interior edge for the top of the die. Then notice that I spin that around on the platform. That's because it's much easier to roll a cutting pad through when you're stopping the edge short at the end of the run. It's much, much harder to start it with a short edge, if that makes sense. So just make sure that you spin it around in the die. It'll make it a lot easier. Now when that comes out, what you've done is you've basically just doubled the height of the accordion page. It still operates exactly like an accordion page. It has the long tab on the side. It has the 2 little short tabs inside. I just need to repeat this 3 more times. The long tabs will get the 6mm wide Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided adhesive. That's my favorite for the accordion albums. And I just want to add that tape to the first 3 pages, right there on top of those long tabs. Now my 4th page doesn't need adhesive because there's no page 5. So on that final page, what I can do is just put it into the trimmer and trim off that long tab on that final page because there's nothing to connect it to. There are a couple different methods for how you attach these to each other. For this album, because it's a tall album and I just think it's very important that the bottom line up perfectly so that it stands nicely on the table, I'm going to do the turn the page like a book, lay it over the top of the other one, hold it in place, and press the tab over. I'll use my little brayer to mash it down and then open it back up. That will ensure that it stands nicely, that I don't get those 2 pages off from each other. So now I'm going to do that again. I'm going to take page 3, turn it like a book, lay it face down on page 2, make sure that bottom edge is really nicely aligned, take a look at the top, make sure that's aligned, and then hold it in place while I bend that tab up and over the page and get it into place. Now, that's thick cardstock, so I really do have to just make sure that I'm really holding it because it's going to want to shift. Then I can open it back up, again, standing nicely on the table, so now I've got 1 more page to attach, turn it like a book, make sure that I line up the bottom edge so it doesn't move. Check the top edge. Yep, it's straight. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Bend that tab over the edge and then just give it a really good press. Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided adhesive rolls are in a variety of different sizes, including this big daddy, the 6-inch wide roll. I love this roll. It will last you a long time. And it's just perfect for this type of thing, where you want to take a nice 6-inch wide strip of cardstock, completely coat the back of it with adhesive, and now anything that I cut out of that white cardstock will become a sticker. Now where you're going to really like using that thick cardstock on the double-sided adhesive is when you have things like frame edges, because what those dies will do is they're going to cut down through the cardstock and they're going to cut through the tape itself, but they're not going to cut all the way through the tape liner, and that will mean that you won't have to pick them out of the die. They'll just become a sticker. Now I'm going to use my little small cutting pad on the top. I'm a big fan of using those little small cutting pads when I'm doing small things, so I don't have to roll all the way through a big cutting pad, and especially if I'm going to cut a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so this is what I mean. See, I can lift those up, and the majority of the paper is just there out of the sticker sheet. I only have a few little pieces of confetti in my die. I can use my dryer sheet trick. There's another video on that if you want to see how the dryer sheets work, but that will grab any confetti out of that die. You can see there are those 3 little white pieces. Now my dies are clean. I'm ready to just keep cutting, cutting, cutting. Okay, I'm going to zoom in close so you can watch me add some frame edges to these pages. Now I'm using the star frame edges here, and there is a star right in the center of the frame edge. And lucky me, it's easy to tell right where the center of the page is. It's right at the pivot point where that little score line is. So my horizontal placement is super easy. I just make sure that that star is centered over the top of that score line. And then for vertical, I make sure that I leave a little bit of cardstock showing inside the frame edge and outside the frame edge. The important thing to remember about frame edges is they do not line up with the outside edge of the page. They do not line up with the inside edge of the page. They float the distance in the middle. Now they do touch each other in the corners, and some of them kind of have a fun feature where, in this case, the stars get completed when you touch those things in the corner, and then you just go right around. It would complete the frame perfectly. Now for this page, I decided I'm not going to add the one across the bottom of the top star. Instead, I'm going to move it down and do the same thing with the 3 edges for the bottom star. That way I don't have to decide which the top or the bottom page gets the middle frame edge. I'll just leave that one off. And then those 2 will just overlap an ever little bit on the inside, but they make kind of a fun, big rectangular frame that way. My dryer sheets are also helpful when I pull up a sticker like this and I still have a bunch of confetti stuck in the paper itself. I could just go into my dryer sheet, give it a little press, and that dryer sheet will pull that paper right out of that piece. Now I've got my white on white frame edges on all my pages, and it's time to do the fun part, which is the tracing. Give yourself permission for your pen to slip every once in a while. No one's even going to notice. But if you've used a thick cardstock like I have, it's actually pretty easy to trace around it. And all I'm using is a nice good gel pen, just an office supply kind of pen that's got a good gel ink to it. And then I'm just going to go, it'll hug the edges of those, frame edges, so then I can just go and start tracing all the way around it. So I think what makes this kind of sketch white and black technique look the best is if you just trace everything. So anything that you put white on white onto your page, you're just going to take the gel pen and trace around it. And, it'll take you a little while, but then in the end, you're going to be left with this. So it just kind of looks hand-drawn, which is really fun. Now, I did turn that page and add some frame edges to the other side. That's just going to be the front of my album, whereas the other 3 I didn't bother because you would never see them. The Star Accordion set comes with a big solid star die, so that's going to be perfect when you want to add photographs or embellishments to the Star Accordion. And what I'm going to use is the Clouds embossing folder to put some texture onto those stars before I add them to the album. And then because I want to continue on with that sketch kind of look, I'm going to go grab my gel pen and I'll actually trace around all of the ridges of those clouds from the texture so that I get that little hand-drawn look. Okay, let's talk about styling some characters. I've cut all the pieces of Buster the dog out of the thick cardstock that has the double-sided adhesive on the back. So the shadow layer will probably pop out, but all of the smaller pieces, and actually, you know what, I'm going to use my magnetic auto parts tray. I love this thing. It's kept me from losing all these small dies. I just toss it in there afterwards, and since it's magnetic, I tend not to lose dies that way. Now the way that the characters work is that you have a detail layer that will lay over the top of the shadow layer, and just like it implies, there is a little shadow. So there's going to be a little bit of white showing all the way around the edge of that detail layer when you get those 2 things pressed together. There are also the eyeballs. I can go in and place those into the little eye socket areas. I've got a little nose. That's a separate little die. I'll put that into the little nose area. And then one last thing, there is a collar that comes with Buster the dog. And that just fits kind of right below the little chin opening is where you put that little collar. The characters are really perfect for this technique because of that little shadow layer and all the little holes, basically all the little areas down below the detail layer, is just super easy to trace. You just go in there with the gel pen and just start filling in all of the little holes and impressions, tracing around the outside and getting Buster to come to life there with all of those black line edging. And again, don't be perfect. Perfect is boring. This is something that you can do that's supposed to look hand-drawn, so definitely just kind of have fun with it. Now, I am absolutely no expert on the hashing. I just kind of go in with my pen and I just start hashing different areas just to kind of give it a little bit of life. And again, it's supposed to look hand-drawn, it's supposed to look sketched, so just have fun with it. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. Or if there is a right or wrong way to do it, just don't tell me about it because I like what I'm doing. And like I said, I'm just going to go in with my gel pen, kind of add some hash marks and some detailing. Maybe I'm going to highlight his little feet at the bottom. I kind of think his ears need a little bit more. Let me just add a few little hashes on there. And just like that, he's going to kind of come to life as this little sketch-drawn little dog. Look at little Buster. Isn't he cute? I think I'll even add some freckles. Now, this is certainly optional. I just thought it might be kind of a cool look if the characters were kind of popping into the frame from underneath the star somewhere and that they were actually contoured to fit that star accordion. So you can see I can use the die itself. I'm just going to tape old Buster in place there underneath that bottom edge so that I can actually use the die to cut some of him off. Sorry, Buster. And then he'll fit the contour of the page itself. Now, meanwhile, I still got to get those little clouds on there, and I realized it would be easier to sketch all the little cloud lines by gluing them first to the page, so that's what I did. Now, I did the same white on white for all of the characters and just did my little tracing and my hashing, and I didn't figure you probably wanted to watch me do all that, but here is the finished product. Is this not cool? I've got them all, Rocky and Whiskers and Chili and Honey the Bear and Hoppy the Frog and Dutch the Fox and Poppy the Owl, and they're wearing props and they're ready for this birthday celebration. Time to assemble this thing. Okay, let's stand it up. And your first step with any accordion, I don't care if it's a double high or a single high, it doesn't really matter. You're going to train the big outer pages to go valley and then mountain and then valley. So that means you look into the valley, you look at the top of the mountain, you look into the valley. It's just kind of a card maker's term. Let me get those balloons out of the way there. Okay, so now you see I've got valley, mountain, valley. It's basically an accordion, and then that guy's going to come over to that guy. Now, I'm a fan of using glue. I'm using my fine line 20 gauge bottle with my Lineco pH neutral adhesive. All this stuff is linked in the about section below the video if you're interested. And I am a fan of a paper clip. So a paper clip can just hold that tab together while I let that glue set up. So all I did is I kind of bent the tab so that I make sure that I don't cross it, because I definitely want to be able to bend between those two pages. And then I'm just going to hold it on with a paper clip, and then I can still wiggle it even underneath the paper clip to make sure that I've got those two stars just right up next to each other, but that they can still bend between the two pages, and I'll fix that one too. Now, since I have a 4-pager here, I can actually skip the middle connection while those two are kind of setting up, and I'll just hop right over to my other little set, which would be in front of the valley, which is between page 3 and page 4. So once again, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to kind of bend that tab up just so I make sure I don't cross the line with my adhesive or when I'm attaching the other page to it. Add a little bit of glue to the tab. I'm going to bring old Honey the Bear right over to Chili the Penguin. Hold those in place while I work a paper clip onto the fold to hold it into position while the glue dries. Do the same thing down here between Dutch the Fox and Poppy the Owl. Got a little glue on my tab. Going to use my paper clip to hold that in place and just let that dry. Okay, just check my connection, make sure that I'm even there. Okay, awesome. Now these two should be set up, so I'm going to take those paper clips off, and I'm going to give those other two a little bit more time. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to flip this whole thing over and work on the final connection, which is in between page 2 and page 3, and that would be behind the mountain. So you see I've turned it over now so that I can work behind the mountain. I'm going to add my adhesive. Make sure you add it on the correct side. Notice that I'm flipping that tab over so that I have access to the underside of it, because I do want it to connect there behind that page so that I won't see it. So I'm bringing that over to its neighbor. I'm just going to hold it, hold it, hold it, get my paper clip on there to keep it in position while I work on the last one, which is this one. Get it over to that side, hold it, hold it, hold it. A paper clip can be my friend. And there you have it. I've got that, all those stars attached to their neighbors using those small little tabs. Okay, time to remove paper clips. Let me just test my connection. Yep, that looks good. And I'll take the final two out, kind of wiggle my hand in there and get those ones from behind the mountain out of there. And now my last step is just to train these inner stars to fold opposite the outer pages. I don't care which set you start with. I'm going to start up there with Honey and Rocky. I grab just Honey and Rocky, try and bend those stars so they fold opposite to the big outer pages. See how you have alternating zigzags? Don't worry that the bottom one didn't do the same thing. You can always retrain it. So now I'm going to go in there and get my bottom one doing the same thing. I want the inner stars to fold opposite the outer pages. So if your outer pages are zigzagging in one direction, all your inner stars are zigzagging in the other direction. Now, the easiest way to tell if you folded it correctly is just when your album is closed up. And I'm looking at the back of the album now, but let me flip it over. Do I see characters? Yup, then I folded it right. One last bit of decoration are these cool balloons. I cut them using the Props 2 die set. And since I use the double-sided adhesive and it's sticky everywhere, and I want to put it, where it's going to overhang, then what I want to do is I want to take a second balloon and glue that to the back side, and that way I won't have any stray adhesive, and it'll also kind of trap that twine. Now, once I got both of my balloons on there, I decided that I wanted the ends of the twine to actually be in the hands of the characters. Now, had I planned ahead, I could have not glued down the detail layer, but instead I had to just take my scissors and kind of snip up the edge of the wing, in the case of Poppy, so that I could slide that twine underneath the wing and then tie it in a knot. Then I just did the same thing with Whiskers the cat. Now, I forgot to mention that I had used some Happy Birthday peel-off stickers, and again, those are listed in the supply list in the About section if you're interested in those Happy Birthday peel-off stickers. If you want to see this picture and stare out a little longer, head on over to the blog post. It's linked in the About section. Facebook users, I'd love it if you'd like my Facebook page, Karen Burniston Designer. You can find out more information about all these dies at ecraftdesigns.com and more pop-up ideas on my blog, karenburniston.com. Thanks for watching.